Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Melinda Butterfield. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a member of Women in Struggle, Mujeres en Lucha. Many of you listening tonight were with us at the National March to Protect Trans Youth and Speak Out for Trans Rights in Orlando, Florida earlier this month. Or maybe you heard about the march and were interested in learning more. It was an amazing day that brought together hundreds of trans community members and allies from across Florida and across the country. I heard from so many local organizers that the event was energizing for them, and from first-time activists who felt inspired to continue this work. The theme of tonight's webinar is what's next after October 7th? Because as great as that event was, we can't stop there. Our grassroots coalition came together last spring because of the urgent need to unite groups and activists around the country who are fighting back against the anti-trans attacks by the far right and the silence of many centrist and liberal politicians and nonprofits. We saw the need to take this fight to Florida, which has been the epicenter of attacks this year under Governor Ron DeSantis, to unite with young people and others who are resisting on the front lines, and to show the trans community and other marginalized communities in Florida that they have support around the country. The need to unite people and movements will continue into the new year, even as the 2024 elections threaten to sweep away any independent organizing efforts, as they have done so often in the past. But for trans people and other communities threatened by the fascist wave, the stakes are too high to let next year be business as usual. That's why our coalition will continue its work after the Orlando March. We're working on exciting plans for the new year, but in the meantime, we want to help give everyone the tools to continue organizing in your city, your community, your school, your union, and to get out the October 7th Coalition's message that we need to build a movement in the spirit of the civil rights struggle, the Stonewall Rebellion, and the AIDS movement of the 1980s, one that poses a real challenge to those in power in the fight for our rights. Tonight, you'll hear from 4 experienced trans organizers about their work on their home turf with organizations that are part of our coalition. Samira Burnside of the Queer Notion in Tampa, Florida, Alia Cusulito of the national organization Queer Youth Assemble, Sakuru Fours of Red Berets for Queers in Southern California, and Sally Jane Black of the Louisiana Women's Action Committee in New Orleans. They will talk about the local struggles for trans and queer rights happening right now, and how they are reaching out and building bridges with other communities and movements to strengthen all of us. Finally, I want to announce that the October 7th Coalition is putting out a call for everyone to join local events for Trans Day of Remembrance on Monday, November 20th, or to organize an event if there is none in your area. Trans Day of Remembrance is set aside to give special attention to remembering those trans siblings who have fallen to hate crimes and violence over the past year, who are always disproportionately young people of color. Our call is based on the labor movement slogan, "Mourn the dead, fight like hell for the living." In the coming days and weeks, we will provide tools you can use to organize for Trans Day of Remembrance events, including a downloadable leaflet and signs. Please stay in touch with us and make sure you've signed up at protecttranskidsmarch.org so you can receive updates when these materials are available. And now, without further ado, I'm proud to introduce Samira Burnside, editor of the Queer Notion and a leading organizer of the October 7th March. Samira?
Yes, thank you so much for the introduction. I just want to say again how happy I am to see the turnout today. and how happy I am to see all of you. I am from Tampa, Florida. I'm 17 years old, and it has been the experience of a lifetime getting to see just how many people care about this fight from so far around. And the fact that there are so many folks who are dedicated to this, continuing to not just showing up for, a couple Instagram pictures and going home, to actually show up and continue the fight. Because it's in Zoom calls and meetings like these and legislative meetings that action happens, and that change occurs. So I'm delighted to see you all here today. I'm going to be speaking not so much about the national playground that we fight on every day, but about Florida, because we had this big gathering in Florida, but there are gatherings in Florida every day fighting for this space because it is very much the forefront of our battle against both um, fascism and authoritarianism, specifically with our governor, and also with political repression, as we see in cases like the Tampa 5, the Uhuru 3, the Jacksonville 13, several others, all named after Florida cities, dissidents and political activists who have been quieted, arrested, or shoved to the side otherwise. And trans people are, a part of that. Our voices are consistently being silenced by our government. And that is in part because we don't know how to engage. So I'm here to give you some of the tools on how to do that. Um, there are a couple of fights in Florida right now that I think are really, really important to be a part of. The first is, as you may know, there was a law in Florida passed by Governor Ron DeSantis recently that made it so that abortions were legal after 6 weeks. There have been further restrictions, or there have been challenges and attempted injunctions, but nothing has stopped the law in its chilling effect from shutting down abortion clinics, from making people carry children to terms they didn't want to, or have to seek out of state care or risky care that they wouldn't have to in the previous political landscape. So, a lot of organizations in Florida, both grassroots and less so. One of the organizations is Equality Florida, my employer, have been working on what's called the Abortion on the Ballot Initiative. Um, this is a petitioning goal to get 1 million petition signatures in order to get abortion on the ballot next year. What that means is next year, much like in other states in the past, and what has been called for many times over, and what has seen success even in red states, we are trying to force our government to allow the people to decide if we get abortion rights. There is voter data that shows that getting this on the ballot would almost certainly lead to success. We have seen this strategy have success in other red states. We need 1 million signatures by the end of this year. It is 3/4 of the way through the year, a little bit over that now. And we have 3/4 of our signature goal. We have around 750,000. And we are trying to make our last big push towards that goal in order to get this on the ballot next year and make it so that we don't have to spend another 4 years in the state when we could have it changed. There's been a lot of challenges, there's been a lot of setbacks as the state has tried to find any way to wriggle out of what the people need. But coming very soon in Orlando, as well as in Tampa, I believe in Jacksonville and several other states, several other, what's I going to say? Several other cities throughout Florida, there are going to be what are called Abortion Day of Actions. I'm going to send a link in the chat to this. We're looking for folks to help us get petitions. And this is something that you can do through this link that I sent you. You can do it with Equality Florida, or also if you just want to go petition at your local market or something, there are ways that you can do that completely independently of them. And it's important that we are all united in this front because it's almost a bipartisan issue at this point. And it is only our governor making this a cultural betrayal that has forced it to be such an issue. So that's one way that you can engage. The other thing I want to let you know about, a lot of these civic processes of our world and what Florida runs on, what the world runs on, are very hidden from us, and that's intentional. The everyday citizen can't attend a school board meeting because it's when they work. The average citizen, can't attend a legislative delegation meeting because it's so far away and they can't make it out there. That's intentional. It's to silence the voices of the oppressed because they're what matters most. Um, Coming soon, as we gear up for legislative session next year, there are going to be legislative delegations held throughout Florida, where basically what they are is every single person who represents that specific county goes to these delegations and they get input from various local communities. This has seen big impacts for things like housing reforms and programs like that. Is also seen social justice-based impacts. This is a way to very directly speak to the face of your legislators. Groups like PSL, Party for Socialist Liberation, and DSAs go out to these, and I would really recommend heading out to these and talking to your local legislators through them and showing up in force, right? Organize with the people in your area and make sure that you are going in force. Pack it full with your messages, right? Keep repeating them because that's the only way they hear it. If one or two or three people say it, they just write it off. But if you can fill a meeting with people saying the same thing, they will have no choice but to ignore it. And if they do, it'll be a news story. So I'm going to send this link in the chat as well. This is a link to the Florida State search board. It's unorganized because again, they don't want you to know that these are happening as the average citizen. But if you scroll through here and you find your county, you'll be able to find your legislative delegation meeting and you'll be able to access that. So let me send that as well. And again, that's all, legislative work and interfacing. Also send, a lot of us are from Orlando here. This is the one for the delegation specifically in Orlando. If you want to go there. A lot of this is, state focused, but there are also countless local fights happening every single day. From the case of the Tampa Five, five students at USF who were brutalized by cops and the state is trying to get them on false charges right now. From various other students here in Florida who are victims of police brutality from year 3, et cetera, et cetera. There are countless stories of, these struggles that get lost when you're focusing on only the big picture, only the whole state, only legislation. And the only way to really tune into that is through interfacing with your local community. If you look up the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression and your local area, you will likely find a chapter, a community action committee for wherever you live. There are countless in Florida. I really highly recommend, even if you don't agree entirely with their platform, if you only agree on some points, getting involved, or even if you can't get involved with everything, knowing, because knowing and being able to talk to people, they say knowledge is power and it feels kind of corny, but it really is. It is knowledge, it is power to know what is happening in your state, what is happening to people around you, and to be able to spread that knowledge. There is a lot, I'm a journalist and currently covering the Israel-Palestine occupation, and there is so much power that state media holds in the way that it chooses not to cover certain protests, certain actions, etc., in favor of other things. And that means that knowledge has power, and that means that spreading the knowledge of things happening has power. So again, I highly recommend looking into your local National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression chapter, as well as your local DSA chapters, etc., etc. And just getting involved in whatever is near to you and focusing on making change there and just being informed if you can't. Thank you all for listening, and I will pass it over to Sally.
Thank you, Samira. Up our next speaker is Alia with Queer Youth Assemble. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. So I'm Alia Crislito. My pronouns are they, them. I recently turned 18 and I'm from a very small town in Massachusetts. And I'm co-president and head of outreach for Queer Youth Assemble. We are a youth-led nonprofit which was founded in 2021, and we have volunteers from around 40 out of the 50 states as well as DC, and that's growing every day as we get more and more volunteers and are able to reach more people. Just as kind of like information about who is leading us. Almost all of our leadership is trans people, half are people of color, about half are from the South, and we're all under the age of 25. All of our work is focused on prioritizing young people, as so many of the attacks around the country over the past few years have been on young queer, especially trans people. Um, our kind of like statement about our organization is that we envision a world where all queer youth have safety, autonomy, joy, and the ability to reach their fullest potentials. So we do this by focusing on events, collaborations with other organizations, professional development for educators, some policy work, and different kind of like artistic projects. And we also work on cultivating a social media presence so we're able to reach our young communities where they are. It's vital for us for folks so that folks are able to find events in their area as well as connect with others around the country online and through our different national protests and coordinated events. And I feel like this is really a huge part of what we're doing is making sure that people are able to find community and able to connect with one another. And then internally, we're sort of organized into teams. So these are advertising, education, outreach, policy, programs, projects, racial justice, and volunteer support. And folks can apply to join as a volunteer no matter where in the country they're located. And we're currently developing our sort of like structures for how people over 25 can also be involved in supporting, because we are focused on youth leadership, but we want older folks to also be able to be involved in that work, even if they don't fit the age range necessarily. And we especially do encourage you to join though if you are a young person or have young people who are really, really important to you. And so our kind of events and what we do take two forms. So we try to make sure that we're focusing primarily on both events promoting kind of joy and cultivating community, but also protests and actions about ongoing, issues as well as current events at times. So most recently we had our youth dissent protests in response to the Supreme Court decisions. And now right now we have going on are the monster mingles, which are kind of just fun Halloween events with food, costume contests, etc. So we try to keep this balance of not focusing too much on one side or the other to make sure that young people aren't, totally bogged down with the weight of the world and feeling they need to do all of the work, but also having the opportunity to do that advocacy if that's what they're interested in. So we try to have that sort of balance. And so we have events in a few different states around the country, which is fully dependent on how many volunteers are located close enough to each other to host an event. So this will continue growing as we do as an organization. So then upcoming events we have are more similar kind of fun ones with Queer Youth on Ice, which is just an ice skating event. And then more like spring and summer, we have Let Trans Athletes Play, which was our first event we ever did even before we founded our organization, which is kind of a combination of a protest and a more fun event where we have, resources and information on how to fight back against bans on trans youth in sports. But also we just kind of gather a bunch of trans people and play sports together, and do water balloon fights and things like that. So it's almost like in defiance of the fear mongering around trans people, we're just there gathering and having fun and playing sports together, but then also sharing resources on how to fight back against this legislation around the country. So it's a really kind of powerful event that I'm really happy we're able to do. And I think this year was our third year that we had those events, so that's really exciting. And all of our events are either free or have an optional donation to help us pay for food and any kind of venue we're using, which is also something that's really important to us is that accessibility. So if folks are able to donate more, that really helps us to get more resources to people, but we want to make sure that anyone is able to attend our events, even if they can't financially afford that. Sorry that I'm going so quickly. Our two kind of most notable protests were our National Queer Youth Walkout in March 2022, where we had upwards of 10,000 students nationwide walk out of their schools in solidarity with all people facing anti-queer and anti-trans legislation. And then a year later, so earlier this year, we had our National March for Queer and Trans Youth Autonomy. This took place in all 50 states, which is absolutely incredible and happened at the last minute. And we saw thousands of people take to the streets in both major cities as well as tiny towns in Alaska. So that was really amazing. I was the lead coordinator for the march in DC, and I know many of you were there, and Samira was also one of the speakers, so shout out. And it was truly a really amazing experience. Well, of course, also very, very stressful to organize. but we had between 1,000 and 2,000 people join us at the US Capitol to fight for queer and trans youth rights. And that work then obviously kind of like continued through this march in Orlando, and it's really incredible to see how we can continue our work as we are now here in this webinar, and it's not ending with one march. And then some of our other work is kind of just fun little things. So we send out supportive birthday cards for queer youth. We connect folks to be pen pals with each other. We have a newspaper called Queer Youth Voices, and we also have seasonal zines where people can just share their art and writing in that kind of format. And so all of this comes together to try to go towards our mission of building, joy, but as well as fighting towards autonomy for queer youth. So my final kind of summarizing notes are that I think it's really vital that we prioritize these actions with, the purpose of prioritizing our rights and fighting for justice and things like that, but that we also ensure that everyone has supportive and fun spaces that they can be in with their communities, especially for young people who might be in homes that aren't supportive, to make sure they can find places online that are safe for them. We need to cultivate that joy and that love to strengthen our hope and our care for one another, so we can also continue this work that we're doing. And also, we have to ensure that folks in rural areas are not forgotten. So for example, our head of education is located in a rural area, just like I am. And she's been looking into how we can improve access to education and support for queer youth in those areas. So when we're doing different types of protests or community events, we have to make sure that those communities are also remembered for events, education, and resources in all of our work. So yeah, that's kind of what I had to share today, but thank you all so much for being here and being involved in this important work.
Thank you so much, Alia. Queer Youth Assemble is really a wonderful resource too. They provide a lot of resources online. So people should definitely check that out on Instagram, on the website, and so forth. And my apologies, I got my internet decided it was a good moment to crash. Thank you, Sally, for pitch hitting in my absence. Hopefully that won't happen again. Now I'm gonna call on Sakura Fours from Red Berets for Queers, who's based in Los Angeles.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, and it's really nice to be here. I just have to say, though, kind of miss like seeing your faces, but I guess we gonna have to make do with this setup. So today, I was asked to talk about the rise of anti-trans fascist activities in SoCal and counter-organizing. So this is a kind of heavy topic, but the direction that I wanna go from, and I just feel that it's really important to talk about like where I'm speaking from. So as you guys know, or maybe you don't know, so previous two speakers mentioned their age, so I'm gonna mention my age too. I'm 52. I came out and started transitioning at age 50. I had organizing experience before that as anti-nuclear and healthcare justice organizing. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I see myself as a newcomer in a trans rights organizing. And I've actually learned a lot in these 2 years, thanks to my siblings. And I'm so grateful. So I don't really speak today as an expert. I will speak as someone who's learned a lot of things in these 2 years, and who is still continuing to learn. So having said that, let me share my screen because I have a little presentation, and I try not to be dry, I promise. Let's see. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Great, so let's just start. So my presentation today, I'm calling it Keeping Each Other Safe, because that's really the heart of this presentation. I don't really want to dwell on but I will inform you what's happening in SoCal, but I don't want to really dwell on the risks that we are living with. So it's really, this heart of presentation is actually sharing my ideas of what we should do, what you can do going forward in any place that you live in the nation or maybe like worldwide. So, you know, I know that like from outside of California, California is always talked about as safe state, but it's really not true right now, especially in Southern California where I live. There has been a surge of anti-trans fascist activities, and it's almost weekly that we get a call, you know, from some communities that you know, a call for community defense. So the situation is very, very dire. And right now, what's really beginning to be a problem, like huge problem, huge threat, is this parental rights activists. So there are attacks on school district meetings almost every week, or if not every week, guaranteed every month. So this is like a map of SoCal. I probably should have made it a little bit smaller because it includes kind of a little bit about Central Coast, which is not included in Southern California. But anyhow, so in these past months, these are the places who, you know, where there have been attacks on school district meetings. So the mob of anti-trans parental rights activists show up constantly in these school district meetings, demanding, you know, things like ban on certain books. Well, I'll talk about that later. But anyway, this map is to just show you how, you know, how many places that we are being attacked right now. So, you know, places like Glendale and Satikoy. Satikoy is actually not a school district. It's a name of the school. So Satikoy Elementary and Glendale Unified School District, these places actually have become national and actually international news in, you know, several months ago because violence broke out at these, you know, protests and counter protests. But anyhow, let me just go on to talk about, you know, what they're talking about. And this is actually not new to you guys because it's happening nationwide, but usually, you know, parental rights people, their agendas are, you know, things like parental notification policies. It's like, you know, forced outing policies, ban on LGBTQ plus inclusive curriculum mandates, ban on pride flags at schools, ban on books with LGBTQ plus characters and topics. And so this is a point. These people are not only talking about, you know, anti-trans agendas though, because they are the same people who are talking about like banning, you know, critical race theory, or, you know, talking about ban on books on Black history. And this is actually a very important point for me, being a person of color, Asian, and an immigrant, because these are the points that we need to be making to people who are outside of the trans community, because we have a common enemy to fight. So next, so anti-trans hate groups. Again, you know, a lot of names, these names are probably familiar to you guys as well. So I'm just like kind of focusing on names that kind of show up on the media, or I've encountered personally. Leave Our Kids Alone, LOCA, is really huge right now in SoCal. And also Lexit. Lexit is a predominantly Latino group who is very, very aggressive in Southern California. But the point of these groups is that, so first, many people who show up at the school district meetings, they're traveling activists, meaning that they come from outside of the community, and they are clearly funded by conservative, you know, strategists, think tanks, groups. And I, you know, mentioned some names here. Names are not that important, but I guess, you know, what I'm trying to say is, yeah, they are well-funded groups, and that's why sometimes we have well, actually, a lot of times in recent months, we have a lot of difficulties gathering numbers on our side to counter protest, because these people can actually like show up on buses, and during weekday, they can show up because somehow they are funded. But on the other hand, we have jobs, a lot of our people may not be able to attend these counter protests. So that has been a challenge to gather numbers to be effective and to be safe. So the last note here. So in SoCal, they're recruiting from POC and immigrant communities to some, success. So that's really concerning to me, again, as a person of color and immigrant myself. So it's very important, for us as POC and an immigrant to go into our communities and try to inform, people within our communities why it's important to stand up for trans and queer rights. So, so what's happening right now? These are kind of like a detailed things, but I thought that was important too. So, state of California actually, and this is good news, state of California has sued to stop the parental notification policies that have been passed in certain school districts in SoCal. So that's a very good news, because for the time being, the notification policies are not in effect because of the lawsuit. However, they anti-trans people are countering this with things like pending lawsuit against California's trans sanctuary law. We have a law in state of California. If people from other states, come here seeking gender affirming care, for instance, we will protect them, right? We will protect their rights to get these care. But that's they are bringing lawsuit against the law. And I hear what they are like cooking up right now, state ballot initiative, ballot measures on things like ban on gender affirming care for minors, and restrict transgender students' use of school bathrooms and participation in sports, mandate a statewide parental notification policy, things like that. So that's what we are kind of like watching out for right now and trying to build power against these threats, if they should come to pass, as a reality. So before I go into counter organizing major concerns, again, I'm going to reiterate some points that I made already. So first thing, media reporting only half truth. So there's a huge bias that we must fight in mainstream media. Mainstream media really do not cover like the whole entire truth. For instance, like when they talk about these protesters, major mainstream news always say parental rights activists, where in fact, when in fact these people are really violent fascists who wants to instigate violence in our communities. And also, like, places like I mentioned Sachiko Elementary School. So at that action, there were actually two queer people who were violently assaulted. No major news reported that. So yeah, that's a problem. And secondly, this kind of relates to the first point, right-wing attacks on independent journalists. There have been like really literal violence, launched on independent journalists who show up at these actions to report on our side, right? So, so independent journalists have to be protected, and I think we must really, we as a community have to protect them, like in many different ways. but I'm going to talk about that later. But so another thing, violence against trans people in the street that are, most go unreported. So in places like, even in places like West Hollywood, where I live, so West Hollywood is known to be a LGBTQ plus friendly city. And actually, majority of city council members in West Hollywood are queers or LGBTQ, okay? But there are, and I've seen it, and my friends have been attacked. There are violence weekly, if not daily, committed against trans people, but most are not reported. And some violence are actually committed by the sheriff department. So that's a major concern. And lastly, lack of infrastructure and programs to protect trans lives. So once again, California is a trans sanctuary state. West Hollywood is a trans sanctuary city, but there are no programs to back that up. So that's what we are trying to, work, or we're working on these cities to have that available to us, because we need that. So counter organizing. So I have a limited time today. So what I'm going to talk about is not like tactics. Actually, I'm really talking about this from the place of, from my heart and spirit. So one thing that's important, I believe. So as a healthcare justice activist, the member of many Red Berets for Medicare for All, Red Berets for Queers, yes, nationwide coalition building and doing something with large orgs, yes, it's important. However, I think what's also important is building groups locally, because and the question is, I guess what I want to ask is, who's got your back? Who's got your back if you are attacked today? Who's got your back if you are attacked tomorrow? Who is gonna come in support of you? So that's why affinity groups are very important. So affinity groups are defined as people who you already know and trust, each other. So please, please consider building affinity groups for yourself, because at the end of the day, you have to have people who have your backs in case of something, happening to you, not only you, but, to your community, right? So build affinity groups, that's crucial. Practice mutual aid. And I speak from my own experience. I am actually homeless right now. Thanks to my trans sisters, I have home. They've given me a bed to sleep on, right? So this is important. So mutual aid sounds kind of hefty, but what I mean by that is make sure we share resources and give what you can give and receive what you can receive, because we really need to build the structure, however small, however large, to help each other. This is crucial for our survival. Get to know each other intimately. I mean, you don't have to get to know everyone, but again, within your group, within your affinity group, it's important to know each other intimately. And this is strategic as well. So each other's strengths, weaknesses, and backgrounds. So you can pull together resources to fight back and organize effectively. Because trust me, everyone has a place in the struggle. Some people are good at fighting physically. I am not. Look at me, 5'2", right? Yeah, so anyway, yeah, but everyone has a place in this struggle. So know each other and complement each other. establish security culture. This is a huge topic. I don't have time to speak on fully. Please educate yourself, like methods, tactics, strategy to keep each other safe. One thing I would say today though, protect your identity is very important right now, especially if you are willing to go out there, counter protesting as a community defense. Be careful about speaking, like for instance, where you have been. And it's different, depending on what role you take, right? If you're like speaker at the event, there's no point of like concealing it because there's no hiding, but if you're there as a community defense or something, be careful about saying you've been there. I recommend you not to, because that may not only put you at risk, but put your comrades at risk, right? So please be careful about that. And also another thing I'm gonna say, there are people from the opposition, I've seen it a lot in Southern California, who come to actions pretending to be journalists. So you want to be very, very careful about photos and videos. And how aggressive you want to be is, I think, it's up to you. But I've seen actions in Southern California where, we ban all videos, photos, because doxing is a serious issue. So please be educated about the security culture and how to keep each other safe. Control the narrative. This is very important because, as I said, independent journalists on our side are being attacked constantly right now. So whatever you can do, and this is, I'm actually a little bit contradicting what I said earlier, because if you put yourself out there on social media, for instance, you will put yourself at risk. But if you are that person who is willing to risk something, speaking about our story is very, very important. So I really appreciate what Samira's doing, Melinda's doing, what Alia's doing. These are, having media outlet of our own, having own platform is crucial right now. So 3 more things. Acting on consent. This is huge. So sometimes situation gets very risky and nobody should be forced to do anything. So, we should always, as an organizer, we should always check individually, how far each person is willing to go and respect that. And I think that's really critical right now. Reach out to other communities. This I can speak on a lot, which I know today, but so yeah, being a healthcare justice activist and also being anti-nuclear activist gives me actually accesses to other communities. And it's really important for us to inform other people of what's happening within our community and recruit them to, to stand up with us, right? So show up for them and they'll show up for you. I think it's as simple as that. And just a little bit of a, advertisement, but healthcare justice activism is actually a great place to be because, trans healthcare, as I said in Florida, Orlando, it's really a crucial issue for us, right? So healthcare justice, I think we should absolutely be involved. So, so that we won't be left out of the conversation about single payer or, Medicare for all and stuff like that. Yeah, so lastly, this is like last thing I'm gonna say, have fun. Just like Alia was saying, we can't always be fighting. We get so tired. I get so tired too. I was so bogged down yesterday. So it's really important to have fun because, because we are human, right? So on the last note, like for instance, I'm thinking in my community as my group for the Trans Day of Remembrance, I would just like to do community picnic. That's what I'm planning to do. Because it's really, it has to be, it must be the opportunity. It should be the opportunity to celebrate each other's existence and, share our love. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Sakuru, for that perspective and for all of the wonderful information you provided. It's so helpful. I wanted to let people know we are going to take questions and answers after the speakers finish. If you have any questions that you're thinking about, you can put them in the Q&A option at the bottom of the screen, or put them in the group chat and they'll be added. And now I'm going to introduce our final speaker for the evening, Sally Jane Black from Louisiana Women's Action Committee.
Thank you, Melinda. As Melinda just said, I am Sally Jane Black. I'm with the Louisiana Women's Action Committee. I'm also with Workers' Voice Socialist Movement here in New Orleans. And I think, as many of you are well aware, we had an election here recently in Louisiana, wherein the far-right Attorney General Jeff Landry was elected governor here. A major part of his campaign for governor was an anti-trans hate campaign, but an important thing to understand about his election is that though he won 52% of the vote, that was 52% of the people who voted, and that is less than. But the number of people who voted was less than half the number of actual voters in the state. In fact, I believe the number is over 60% of people did not vote at all. And so he was elected by a small number of people, and his values certainly do not reflect the values of the people in Louisiana. This seems to be the case across the South in most cases. Samira alluded earlier to the fact that if they got a referendum on abortion on the ballot in Florida, it would probably pass, whereas running completely in opposition to what the governor is pushing for, it's very similar here. In case anybody is unfamiliar with Jeff Landry, he is certainly on par with Ron DeSantis and the other notable leading fascists in this country. When he was Attorney General, he was a part of a group called RAGA, or the Republican Attorney General Association, which uses their office to push their right-wing political agenda, usually very clearly backed by whichever capitalist funders are backing them, particularly with Jeff Landry here in Louisiana. It's the oil companies. He used his office as Attorney General to attack trans youth, to attack abortion rights, to attack immigrant workers, and to attack people on Medicaid. Amongst his most egregious attacks were an attempt to sue in order to push 800,000 people off of Medicaid. Another one of his attacks was to attempt to subpoena immigrant support groups in order to get a list of their clients, so that he could, use the state to target asylum seekers and other immigrants. At the same time, he owns a business that uses immigrant labor through the H-2B program, so he's literally profiting off of the people he's terrorizing. He also, the New Orleans City Council at one point pretended to attempt to make New Orleans an abortion sanctuary city, and I say pretended to because the extent to which they went was to politely ask the police not to enforce the anti-abortion laws, which wouldn't have worked anyway. But Landry used his role on the bond commission of the state to deny funding for pumps to pump water out of the city when it flooded. So essentially, he extorted New Orleans by threatening to let it drown unless they backed his anti-abortion agenda, and of course they caved. That's just the tip of the iceberg with him. We know from observing DeSantis and Abbott, and from observing his record as an AG, and from observing the wave of state attacks from state legislatures, pretty much exactly what he's going to be doing as governor. Whether it's continuing the assault on immigrants, definitely going to be ramping up against trans people, definitely going to continue to, they've made it explicit that they want to pass even stricter anti-abortion laws, which wouldn't even seem possible here, but that's certainly one of their goals. And one of the worst things that he threatened early on, which he's sort of walked back recently, is that he has threatened to end the Medicaid expansion here, which would cut hundreds of thousands of people off of Medicaid and deny them healthcare access. And it's impossible to overstate how horrifying that is in a state with one of the highest maternal mortality rates, in a state where there is a 25-year gap in life expectancy between rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods, and in a state that literally has a region called Cancer Alley. Whether he actually goes through with that or not, whether he sticks to his promise not to do that or not, we know he's going to make some kind of horrific attacks on the workers. And we also know that he has significant campaign contributions from the insurance industry. So his promises aren't really worth much. We know that the money that he's getting from his rich backers is going to speak pretty loudly. Because of his stance on this, we have seen some Democrats in the state sort of speak out very weakly against him. But it became clear, first of all, in the campaign, the campaign for governor, that the Democrats weren't really putting any effort to opposing him here. And even if they did, the current governor here is a Democrat who signed the anti-abortion law, who is very pro-cop, and who is more or less indistinguishable from the right wing in many ways. He did, to his small credit, attempt to veto the anti-trans healthcare law here, but that was overturned by the Republican Party. So it's clear that we can't rely on the Democrats here. It's clear that Landry is going to push an agenda that is an all-out attack on the workers of this state and every possible group that he can find. And it's also clear that he's following a blueprint that has been laid out for him by his rich backers, who have done the same things in Florida, who have done the same things in Texas, who have pushed these same laws all over the US, and are using groups like the group Sakuru referenced to these what we call astroturf groups, these well-funded groups that look like they're grassroots groups, look like they might be some kind of nonprofit, but really they're just agents of right-wing agendas. And honestly, to call them think tanks or astroturf groups is unfair. They're really just well-funded hate groups. Those are being used here and elsewhere to push these agendas on the local level. And so it's clear that they have a coordinated movement. It's clear that they have a united right-wing movement here in this country. And the only answer to that, as we have said over and over again, of course, is that we unite our movements against them. We've spoken, others have spoken tonight about that in different ways, but some things that we have been talking about here in Louisiana with Workers' Voice and with the Louisiana Women's Action Committee is, looking at the upcoming attacks, whether it's an attack on Medicaid or any of these other potential assaults, and seeing how we can make it clear how these cut across all different groups, cuts across all different races and all different genders, how it will disproportionately affect some groups, but that it is in the interest of all of us to stand together against them. If they use attacks like their anti-trans agenda, then it becomes especially important to us to make it clear that anti-trans attacks do affect more than just trans people, and that it is in the interest, we have to make it explicitly clear that it is in the interest of other workers to stand up for trans rights. I'm really glad Sakuru mentioned, you know, if we show up for other groups, they'll show up for us. We as trans people, for those trans activists who tune into this, it is vitally important that we stand up for causes outside of the immediate LGBTQ issues. I mean, I've been especially heartened in the recent weeks to see so many queer and trans people standing up for Palestine, especially. But this goes for all of these issues. And in order for us to succeed against Landry or against the fascist movement in general, or against, you know, any specific attack, we have to keep from isolating ourselves. It's really tempting to surround ourselves with people who are like us, and to speak only to people who already get it, to direct our message to people who are already in the movement. And it is vital that we reach out to other parts of the movement and bring it together. But we're going to have to go beyond that. We really, really have to make a concerted and intentional effort to reach out to workers who have never thought about these issues before, especially when it comes to anti-trans stuff. Most people, all they've heard about trans people is what they're hearing in the news. I mean, I think most of us here, the trans activists on this call or who are listening, there was a period in our lives where we had no words to even explain ourselves. And it was a thunderbolt moment for me to even hear the word transgender at some point in my life. And that was well into adulthood. I didn't transition until I was 34. And that was 20 years after the first time it occurred to me that I might want to transition, but I didn't have the words to find it. If I, as a trans person, couldn't find that information, imagine that cis people who are only hearing what the right-wing media or the mainstream media, for that matter, says about us. Like, they have no idea. And so we have to be willing to go to them and speak in plain language and explain things and talk to people who, I mean, we're going to have to be willing to get out there and talk to people who are probably going to misgender us, who are probably going to get our pronouns wrong, who are probably, it's not that we need to go to people who outright hate us. It's not that we need to go to people who are like Moms for Liberty, who are these well-funded agents of the capitalists who are just a paid hate group, but we need to go to people who don't know anything about us and talk to them and explain to them how it's in their interest to stand with us, and to show them that by standing with them when they're under attack. And that's two different things, right? The first is to say, like, look, when they're attacking us, this is going to hurt you too. And to say, all right, well, they're attacking my immigrant siblings. We're going to show up for them, whether they get it right or not. You know, we're going to show up for the labor movement, or for, you know, for the minimum wage, or whatever it is. That's the work that we have to do going forward, especially considering that in the coming year, we are up against, I know I've said this before, but we're up against the presidential elections, which are going to try to drown out everything else. And so we're going to need to be willing to do the hard work, the very long-term work of speaking directly to people, going out, even if it means going out to the bus stops with a flyer, or to parking lots, or community centers, or wherever we can find working class people, and just get the information in their hands and have conversations with them. That's the work we're going to need to be doing, because we don't own television stations and we don't control the search engines, and we can't just say go Google it. Google's owned by billionaires, that we can't trust Google with this information. We have to do this work ourselves. And so that's what we're looking at doing here in Louisiana, always, really, but especially in the face of a hardcore right-wing governor like Landry, who is absolutely he's already shown that he used his position as attorney general to push this extreme agenda. We know it's going to be even worse with him as governor, and that's the path we're setting for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sally. So I want to remind people you can put questions in the Q&A spot in the bottom of your screen if you'd like us to respond to them. I just wanted to mention one example of going out to do outreach or be in support of another group that's in struggle. Sally and Sakura and I were part of a team of activists before the Orlando March. When we were down in the area, we went to the United Auto Workers picket line. There's a small UAW plant that's part of the nationwide strike and in the Orlando area. And we went out there to stand in solidarity with them. There was, very varied responses and understanding from workers on the picket line there. But it was important that we went and showed our solidarity, because they saw trans people on the picket line standing with them and other allies who support trans rights. And that's going to have an impact when we do that over the long term, in terms of people seeing who their friends really are and aren't, even if they're confused right now. So let me take a quick look in the Q&A and see what we've got. Ali asked if the recording of this event will be accessible after this is finished, and the answer is yes. There's a live stream on Facebook at Struggle La Lucha's Facebook page, but also there will be a recording made available in the next couple of days on YouTube that will be shareable. So we'll send that out to folks when that's ready. Where can I find out more about events and things like this happening? Orlando specifically, but I want to be aware of more things anywhere. And Alia responded, Queer Youth Assemble shares our events on our Instagram and websites, and often shares other events as well. Happy to receive DMs asking us to share something anytime. Protect Trans Kids. Also, we have a number of social media pages. Maybe Samira can comment on that, but we also share our events and other events that we support on there, as do many groups. And we're going to try to strengthen that, particularly around Trans Day of Remembrance. Does anyone else want to speak to this?
Yeah, I'd love to tag in. Yeah, I run our social medias. Please feel free to DM us anytime or email me at sburnside@thequeernotion.com. About any events, I am happy to get involved. I'm happy to post about it and get it out there to people. really what this coalition is a bunch of different groups that have different interests, but that all come together on a couple of very important issues. And what we serve best as is a network, as something that you can put your event into, and we can connect you with groups that can help you make it happen. You can email us going, hey, are there things in my area? And we'll look into it. We really want to serve as a connecting tissue from the national to the local, from groups like QIA, which are so big, to small groups that like get lost line boxes or whatever, right? We want to connect you to groups all the way in Tampa that might be able to send people on buses when you're up in Colorado, right? We serve as a connecting tissue, and we really want to help you make your thing happen, because this is a coalition effort on all fronts.
Thank you, Samira. Obsidian put a comment in the Q&A. An Orlando organization to get involved with is Orlando for Gender Equality. We have a meeting this Saturday, the 28th, at the library. Please look up Orlando for Gender Equality on Instagram. And that is one of the groups that participates in our coalition that was part of our effort in Orlando. So definitely check them out. Liz Toledo posted, please elaborate on how Protect Trans Kids, as well as other organizations, can join and support other causes. Anyone like to take a crack at answering that? Sally?
Sure. I mean, if you're trying to, I mean, it's really as simple as showing up whenever other groups have events, or I mean, if you can't find an event in your area, go out and put the word out about it. If you have your own social media, you can make your own statements on what's happening in the world, or you can I mean, like I said, just do outreach on the subject. If you just create something that you can go to people or have those conversations. But ultimately, I mean, like Melinda pointed out, we went out in support of the UAW workers on strike. I don't know how to magically know what's going on, but once you start knowing what's going on, once you start looking around for these events happening, you'll start to find them and get connected. But the simplest thing is just to show up whenever you find it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of second that, agree with keeping an eye out for any flyers or social media posts, and not just quickly scrolling past them, making sure you make a note of it, because I know I often forget something after I see it, and see how you can get involved in those. And then also kind of just on either a large or small scale, seeing how you can collaborate with other groups. So for example, in my own school, this is on a very small scale, but we've had some book banning attempts, and some of us students were trying to organize against them. And so we collaborated between the GSA, the Gender Sexuality Alliance, and our BIPOC club. So we had the people of color and the queer people working together on this issue because it was kind of a shared issue that we were dealing with. So that kind of collaboration, if you have a shared issue, but also to kind of support one another in your own kind of fights, is a way that you can kind of show up for one another.
I'll just add that one of the things that we want to do around Trans Day of Remembrance is to have a piece of literature that people can download from the website if you don't have something of your own already, or signs that you can download and make at home and take with you, as a way of connecting people with the work that we're doing. It's a way to engage people around this issue and hopefully find ties to them, and also help us connect them to the national effort that we're doing. Sakura?
Yeah, I'm I'm gonna reiterate, I guess, what Sally and Alia said too, but I would like to speak as someone who leads an organization, but also like individual. So I think as an organization, you have a power to endorse things. And okay, so you really, I mean, you do, of course, want to be selective, but I think endorsing other people's like events, for instance, or campaigns is a great way to, get your name out there and, demonstrate your solidarity. So that's what I've done like over the years, as my anti-nuclear organization, Pacific Asian Nuclear Free Peace Alliance. Even though, even if like, the cause or event that I'm supporting may not be like directly associated with anti-nuclear or peace, per se, but if I see any intersection, I will, we will endorse. So that's one as an organization. But I just wanted to like give you one example of my frustration actually for the past year. So there was this incident in Greater LA where a Filipino family was violently attacked by a white supremacist. And we were on the campaign to get justice for this family because their court case really, I mean, it was like a year-long process, but hate crime charge was dropped as a result. I mean, because the court system is very much racist. So as a result, I mean, at the end of it, the hate crime charges were dropped. We didn't get what we wanted. So as an Asian person, Asian immigrant, my frustration was kind of reaching out to LGBTQ plus orgs and asking for their support, but none was given to us. So that's like kind of a reverse example. But if at that, in that situation, if the LGBTQ plus organization in Greater LA supported us, like Asian cause, because hate crime is everyone's issue, right? Every marginalized community face this, hate crimes. So we must work together. But anyway, so things like that, I think if you look around, it's not that hard to find a cause that affects you too. So show up, reach out, endorse. Thank you.
Sally?
Yeah, we've addressed this question as to how organizations can do all this, and I know most of the people here tonight are probably with an organization, but for those maybe listening in or finding this later, if you're not with an organization, I just want to make it absolutely clear you need to join one and get involved somewhere. That is the first thing anybody should do.
There is a sort of related question here. Let me just read. Sophie asked about groups in the Tampa Bay area. And Samira responded, Tampa Bay Political Action Committee and Tampa Bay SDS are both great organizing groups. And you can also reach out to Samira directly, who is based in Tampa. If you go to our website, protecttranskidsmarch.org, and click on the endorser button at the top, you'll see a list of all the member organizations in the coalition. Most of them have links to their individual websites or social media. So you can also look there and see groups that are maybe in your area or have a particular affinity to, then you could reach out to them that way. Sally is currently working on developing a list, a more comprehensive list of local groups that work with us that people can participate in. So be on the lookout for that. And Gloria asked, are there going to be regular webinars or meetings that we can invite people to join to get involved, to participate, or just to learn about what is happening nationally with this movement? is there literature or a publication we can use to engage people around this issue? And these are very good questions. Folks know that we met in the lead up to October 7th, we were meeting as a coalition about every 2 weeks for several months. We will get back to a regular meeting schedule for the coalition, maybe not quite as frequent for a while until we have another project underway. But we definitely will be having meetings that people can plug into. I think the idea of having regular webinars of an educational character is a great idea that we can definitely think about. Maybe having something once a month that could be, doesn't have to be a long event, could just be one organizer or a couple of organizers addressing a particular issue to plug people in. That would be super helpful. Again, with literature and publications, we will be making more stuff available on our website and our social media in the coming weeks. But also, again, many of our participating coalition members have publications or have websites with news that you can look at, like the Queer Notion, for example, that Samira runs. And you can find all of those on our endorsers list on the website. So please check those out. The coalition website is protecttranskidsmarch.org. Are there any other questions that folks would like to ask this evening? If not, just going to make a couple of quick announcements. One is to remind people that we are calling for everyone to go out and participate in Trans Day of Remembrance on Monday, November 20th. Look for events in your area. If you're participating or organizing an event in your area, let us know so that we can list it on our social media and website. In the coming days, we will be uploading a flyer and signs and other materials that you can download and use when you go to your local events. And the other thing I wanted to announce was that many of us, as Sally alluded to, are also involved in the struggle for Palestinian rights and the current crisis that's going on. There's going to be a national march in solidarity with Palestine in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, November 4th at 12 noon. People are gathering at Lafayette Square next to the White House. And I believe there will be buses coming from many different cities around the country. So please consider, if you're able to, participating in that event and also going out to local Palestinian solidarity events that are happening around the country almost every day in many places right now. It strikes me that we can learn a lot from the Palestine solidarity movement as a trans community. This was a community that, certainly within my lifetime as an activist, has gone from being vilified and marginalized to being one of the most vibrant activist, struggles in this country, with massive support on campuses and all over the place, as we've seen in recent days. And that is in the face of the overwhelming hostility of the media and the government, similar to what trans people are facing right now in terms of demonization. So it shows that, grassroots organizing and solidarity in a long-term perspective can really, turn things around in important ways in terms of building a movement. And those are lessons we can learn from the Palestine solidarity movement. So that's definitely a great, really important place to go out and show solidarity right now. Anyone else like to make any last words? Samira?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing before I'll leave. We're organizing around Trans Day Remembrance, and as this webinar was being hosted, Cheryl and Marjorie, a trans woman and drag performer from Albuquerque, Mexico, was reported as having been murdered in a hate crime. Since the time when on the back end I made the graphics for our Trans Day of Remembrance initiative, the number has jumped from 19 to 21 transgender non-conforming persons killed this year. And as Sukuro said, there are many, many more that go unreported and unheard. And it is our job to, as we go forward in this work, make sure that their losses are not in vain, that the future people that live after them get to live in dignity and get to breathe the air of equality. And it is our job to make sure that goes forward. And I am happy to be in this room with you all and moving forward on this. And I hope that we keep this energy moving, not just for ourselves, not just for the trans kids who are born, but also for the people that we've lost already. And I can't wait to see you when we win.
Thank you, Samira. And that's a wonderful way to wrap up our event tonight. Thanks everyone for participating. Don't forget, if you haven't already, sign up at our website so we can stay in touch. Thank you and good night.